There are about 17,000 known invasive species on the planet. The Asian carp, zebra mussel, cane toad, and kudzu are among the most invasive. The kudzu proves to be one of the most difficult to remove. Kudzu, also known as the invasive species that ate the South. Kudzu is a native vine of Japan and Southeast China. It was brought to the United States in 1876 and was praised as a sweet-smelling ornamental plant. It was used for soil erosion control during the 1930s to 1950s. However, it was quickly learned to be a threat to native ecosystems and natural resources. Agricultural Research Service scientists in Stoneville, Mississippi, reviewed different programs known to successfully suppress kudzu. However, as stated here, it takes about 10 years of persistent herbicide applications to completely eradicate the kudzu. So Weaver developed a new effective management program that can substantially reduce kudzu over 1 and 2 year periods. This will allow landowners to establish forestry, wildlife habitats, and recreational parks. In this program, Weaver applied 4 different herbicides, individually or in combination, and a bioherbicide treatment at 3 different kudzu-infested sites. These treatments were repeated for 2 years. 91% of kudzu was killed after 1 year, and 95% was killed after 2 years. The treatment involves applying a bioherbicide application, mowing, and revegetation.
It's just one of those really nasty vines that literally grows almost a foot a day under proper conditions.
The Asian carp is native to Europe and Asia. However, it has been in the United States for over 100 years. They are most common in the Mississippi River and lakes within the Mississippi Rivershed. They were introduced in the U.S. in the 1970s to control algae, weed, and parasite growth in aquatic farms, weeds in canal systems, and one form of sewage treatment. These fish escaped into the Mississippi River basin and established breeding populations. So why are they such a huge problem? Asian carp cause serious damage to native fish populations in the lakes and rivers that they infest, because they outcompete other fish for food and space. They also lower the water quality, which can kill off sensitive organisms like native freshwater mussels.
We see them almost every weekend. They've jumped up, knocked people over before, jump off the side of the boat. I mean, it's dangerous.
Zebra mussels. They are small, freshwater shellfish that were likely brought to the U.S. from Russia. People believe that these zebra mussels came as stowaways in the ballast water of ships. They are native to the Caspian and Black Sea south of Russia and Ukraine, and have since become widespread in Europe and the United States. They outcompete natives for food and space, and because of their fast reproduction, can quickly overwhelm a water system.
These larvae, or villagers as they're called, they're sticking to your boat. They're sticking inside your live wells. They're sticking to your fishing line and your bait buckets, on your dogs, on your boots. They're everywhere.
The cane toad is a large, warty, poisonous amphibian native to South and Central America and considered to be one of the worst invasive species in the world. They were introduced in many countries to help control agricultural pests. They failed at this task, but turned out to be remarkably successful at reproducing and spreading themselves. Here in the Ozarks, we face many invasive species that threaten our ecosystems.
The most prominent ones are probably winter creeper is everywhere, and that's a plant that it's a ground cover. It grows along the ground. You'll see that at the zoos. You'll see that even like at MSU climbing up the trees. It's all over the place. There's also calorie pear, which are the flowering trees that you see right now. Those are invasive. There's honeysuckle, Japanese and bush honeysuckle, both are invasive. We also have a lot of feral hogs, which you don't really see that in the city, but those are pretty prominent, and you'll see those in a lot of places. Some invasives that we're keeping an eye out for are hammerhead worms. Those are incredibly dangerous. First of all, they eat earthworms, so they can take over an entire earthworm population. They also are very difficult to kill. They very well could be coming here. Kudzu is it's a vining plant. You'll see it in lots of different states, but that's one that we keep an eye out for too.
So what makes these species spread to new regions? Climate change.
Climate change specifically affects invasive species and the spread. With increased CO2 in the atmosphere, they become more resistant to herbicide. Whenever there are extreme weather events, which are caused by climate change, a lot of times invasive species can take over an area a lot quicker. Native plants usually take longer to grow than invasives do, so that causes more spread. Most commonly, whenever it comes to invasive plants, there are a number of ways that they do it. Sometimes it's suffocation. Some plants like Japanese honeysuckle and winter creeper will suffocate other species by literally choking them. They'll grow on them and choke them out. Actually, here in the park we have an endangered flower here. It's called the Missouri bladderpod, and it only grows in glades, and as far as I know, it only grows in 2 places, here and Wilson's Creek National Battlefield. And our glade got overrun by eastern red cedar, and it ended up wiping out all of the Missouri bladderpod here. And it wasn't until we cut down the eastern red cedar and did a controlled burn in our glade that the Missouri bladderpod actually came back.
Invasive species management practices may not be conducted efficiently. In order to help stop the spread, you yourself can do a few things to help. You can start by cleaning all of your hiking and fishing gear before you travel to a new area. Do not move firewood to new areas. If possible, fish with bait that is native to the waters you are in. Help further by volunteering at local removal projects. Report any invasive species you spot yourself. Make sure you are not planting an invasive plant in your garden. Before moving to a new body of water, ensure your boats and gear are cleaned. These non-native species leave many lasting effects on the areas they invade. One of those lasting effects is human health.
Whenever you have invasive plants, they have shorter root systems than our native plants, which means that they don't hold the ground in place very well, the soil. So it causes erosion, it causes runoff. So any pollutants that end up in the soil, so like let's say you're changing your oil in your driveway and you spill some oil. Whenever it rains, that washes into your soil, and eventually that will end up in a waterway typically. Whenever you have invasive species, the roots don't filter out those contaminants, and it eventually ends up in the streams. Whereas native species help filter out those contaminants, they also hold the soil in place so it doesn't end up in the water, because that is a form of pollution, is soil getting in the water. That's when you see the brown streams and dirty looking water. It's because of erosion and runoff. Other examples with animals are like feral hogs that I talked about. Those carry diseases, but they also are just dangerous to humans in general. They've been known to attack people.
The damage these effects cause can cost local areas tons of money to repair the damage done.
An example is zebra mussels. They're a mussel that lives in the water. Those have been known to take over an area because they can grow very, very rapidly. They grow inside pipes, so they've been known to shut down entire hydro plants, entire filtration areas for drinking water. Just a lot of destruction and kill fish. They sometimes will grow on fish. So economically, whenever you have an entire plant shut down because of an invasive species, that's a huge deal. There are also a lot of economic impacts with agriculture. You get a lot of different kinds of plants that cattle or horses or other animals won't eat. And so farmers have to put in a lot of money to try to get rid of those species. Some of them may even be poisonous to agricultural animals too.
For my service learning, I worked with the Watershed Committee of the Ozarks. For the majority of my time at the watershed, I helped remove the invasive species called the winter creeper.
I think an important thing to know is to just be aware of different types of invasive species. There are insects, there are plants, there are animals, and know what to do in case you see them. So there are a lot of species to learn. I definitely don't know all of them for sure. But there are still some that, like winter creeper, is being sold in stores, and you could just go to a gardening store in Springfield and buy it. So I think if people educate themselves and know, they see winter creeper in a store and they think it's really pretty, maybe look into those things and look into what's a good substitute, what's a different plant that maybe looks similar but doesn't cause as much destruction.